Rance. If you've been on the internet long enough, you might have heard of it, whether from its infamous reputation, the Zero One OVA, or simply the bad memes. It's a series with a long legacy, and is of importance to gaming culture. It's not taken too seriously in the West, and is generally overlooked. Today, I will try to explain what Rance is, and why you should check the series out if you haven't yet. Rance is an eroge RPG series that started in 1989 with Rance 1, Quest for Hikari, and then in 2018 with Rance 10, Showdown, making it the longest running eroge, and one of the longest running game series in general. It spans approximately 13 games and 3 remakes. The series was developed by Alisoft, which are well known for other titles like Evenical, Toshin Toshi, and Beat Angel Escalier. The series itself was created and directed by the genius Tada, a man with unparalleled vision and enjoys self-inserting himself into the series as a Hanawa. The series follows the exploits of the titular character Rance and his slave Sylplane. The term slave may raise alarms, but trust me, it's a wholesome relationship. They travel across the continent in search of more women for Rance to bed, and often find themselves at the center of major political conflicts in different countries. Unlike other long-running game series like Final Fantasy, which have standalone stories every game to make it more accessible for newcomers, Rance is an ongoing narrative. While the games themselves can be seen as somewhat self-contained adventures, there'll be characters that reappear in every game, and they keep introducing new characters, leading to a staggeringly huge cast. Even minor characters might appear or get mentioned later. It makes the world feel lived in and believable despite the absurdity of it. It helps that the lore of said world is extremely well fleshed out and genuinely fascinating. Sounds awesome, right? Now let me address the elephant in the room. Rance is a character that is driven by his desires, namely his lust for women, leading him to attempt to have sex with almost every woman he meets, sometimes without their consent. Rance is a rapist. If you are sensitive to such topics, this series likely isn't for you. I will say that Rance does try his hardest to gain consent when possible, and a good deal of his scenes are consensual, but he will resort to assault. This can actually end up backfiring or just failing miserably, so it's not like he always gets his way. The sexual assault is something that's treated as a joke, but scenes are surprisingly funny, making it easier for the audience to tolerate such scenes. The sexual assault is something that's treated as a joke, with scenes that are surprisingly funny, making it easier for the audience to tolerate such scenes. Whether that subject matter is something that should be taken so lightly is questionable, but it can treat rape delicately when the situation calls for it. It's clear that Rance is not malicious in his actions. He's more like a child that doesn't understand that not every woman wants to have sex with him. Now you might ask, why would I want to play a series with such a dubious protagonist? Well, Rance is an arrogant, self-centered, stupid, hedonistic rapist. He's also one of the most charismatic and unique characters I've come across. He was originally conceived as a parody of the typical selfless hero trope seen in most stories, and is instead a purposefully immoral protagonist. He believes himself to be a hero of justice and sees everything he does as righteous, even while doing heinous actions. When I started the series myself, I had my doubts that I would like him, but he ended up winning me over. He's more than a simple brute, he has a softer side, and seeing that every so often is some of the best moments in the series. He's really just a massive tsundere who doesn't know how to properly express his affection. But seeing those rare moments when he shows how much he loves Syl, it's clear he's a more nuanced character. His relationship with Syl is one of the key aspects of the series and what humanizes him the most. Despite technically being his slave, she can leave him whenever she wants because the guy who sold her was trying to rip Rance off, but chooses not to because she genuinely loves Rance. She sees the good in Rance and brings out the best in him. In turn, Rance is extremely protective of her, but he's not above always teasing her. Their dynamic is adorable and portrays a romantic relationship far more compelling than most others. The series explores how much laxer his morals become in her absence, which goes to show how important she is to him. Then there's that unwavering confidence and optimism he has no matter the situation. He has a firm belief in his own strength and ability, leading him to take on any obstacle with a smile. It's an endearing quality. Rance's nature as a pleasure-seeking wanderer is integral to the themes of the overarching narrative. In this world where everyone simply follows roles assigned to them, where everything is rigidly dictated by literal levels and stats, Rance is an aberration and is born with limitless potential. He shows the power of individuality and will, that change is possible, defying the will of the gods. His self-centrism is his greatest strength, showing that people can create their own happiness and find purpose in a seemingly hopeless world. There's the ironic detail about how the real hero of the world is incompetent and doesn't achieve anything worthwhile because he's more reactive instead of directly pursuing his goals like Rance does. Rance's personality makes even more sense when knowing his backstory. While not directly discussed, in the games themselves, interviews and guidebooks paint a clear picture of the man's history and why he behaves the way he does. Now let me address some common misconceptions. Rance has been called a visual novel series, and while it's not entirely inaccurate, I don't exactly believe it to be true. There is a large focus on gameplay in these. While things like Ace Attorney or Danganronpa could get what's being called VNs, despite the limited gameplay, Rance leans much harder on being focused on the gameplay. You'll be spending more time engaging with mechanics than reading text in most games. The only reason it isn't called an RPG outright are the H scenes. I suppose the logic is that normal RPGs don't have long, detailed sex scenes, so it must be a visual novel. What's classified as a VN in the West is rather arbitrary, but that's a discussion for another day. Another common mistake is dismissing it as another porn game. While it's true that there's a plentiful amount of sex, there's far more to the series than that. As mentioned before, there's deep gameplay and lovable characters, fantastic world building, and thought-provoking themes. The series has multiple things to offer besides masturbation material, so I think it's worth checking out if you go in with an open mind. Let me elaborate more on the gameplay of the series and why it's so unique. You see, while many other series like Dragon Quest maintain a consistent style of gameplay, or how Final Fantasy does experiment with gameplay styles to constantly reinvent itself, but Rance goes beyond that. Rance entries can drastically change in genre between games. Take for instance Sengoku Rance. It's one of the most enjoyable strategy games I've come across, with an addicting gameplay loop. It can be tough as nails if you're unprepared, but there's usually ways to achieve victories if you're smart and lucky. There's a plethora of unique events, characters to recruit, different routes, giving the game staggering replay value. Then the next game is Rance Quest, a more standard RPG with a mission-based structure. Of course, it has a few twists on the formula, with party members only having a limited number of actions per move, so you have to choose who to take with you carefully and switch members frequently. It doesn't have multiple routes, but you can play the game again in a special New Game Plus mode that makes the game more difficult, and when you play the game for a third time, you get a few new characters and access to optional super bosses. Personally, I don't find this system to be as engaging as Sengoku, but I know people that adore it. Following that up, Rance 9 is a strategy RPG in the vein of something like Fire Emblem. Rance 10, however, is a card game with gacha elements. I think you get the idea by now. Every game is different and has something unique to bring to the table. Even if someone doesn't resonate with the gameplay of one, they might fall in love with another. Except for maybe 0, 2, and 5D, playing those is kinda miserable. At least with 5D it's a novel experience and fits with the dumb tone of the game. This constant shift in gameplay between entries has a deeper thematic meaning as well. Rance, as a character, is never satisfied with complacency and is constantly seeking new experiences and horizons. So of course the gameplay would never stay the same every adventure. It would be boring otherwise, as he would say. This could also reflect the developer's mentality, as Alisoft is an innovative company that's always experimenting and pushing the elongated industry forward. Now that I've gone over the gameplay, I'll talk about the music. It's all stellar and full of memorable tracks. Shade and DJ C++ are brilliant composers. In particular, I believe 03 is one of the strongest soundtracks I've heard in any game. Rance's theme song, My Glorious Days, is basically a version of the East Germany anthem because of a mishap. It's the most awe-inspiring HC music ever. Furthermore, another thing worthy of note in explaining why Rance is worth playing is the world. The setting of the continent is very distinct and captivating. The series that's self-aware of RPG mechanics like skills and levels. Everyone has a set level cap from birth, except for Rance, but he's an anomaly that classifies as a balance breaker because he does not function with the rules of the system. There's a reason why such a system is in place, and it feeds into the larger meta-narrative of the series, the relationship between the player and the games they play, the agency of the characters in those games. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of depth to the setting, and refreshing takes on concepts like Demon Kings. The content is a well-realized setting in how in-depth it goes about the history of the world. The long-running nature of the story helps with this, as having a continuous setting in a series of games is something seldom attempted. The closest I can think of is the Kiseki series, Ys, and maybe Kingdom Hearts. Having all those games to explore the many different countries and facets of the world. One thing I really like about the content is how it's unlike any fantasy world in fiction. It has this absurdist feel of bizarre looking creatures in a sort of pseudo-modern fantasy setting. You'd expect things like orcs and goblins in fantasy, but there are none to be found here. Instead there are monsters like Yankees, Bill Gates, and Kamen Rider bugs. There are elves, but they're called Kalor and function differently from elves commonly found in fiction. There are Hannies, perverted clay creatures that are a menace to society. They're kind of similar to Moogles in Final Fantasy, in that they're a staple of Alisoft, showing up in basically all of their games. Then there's odd things like how you can visit the Alisoft office in one of the cities in Rance 3. You'd think extreme fourth wall breaks like this would take you out of the experience and ruin the immersion, but it somehow fits in with the absurdity of the world. It's impressive how consistent the world building is, considering the series basically started as a joke. For example, there's a character named British in the first game. He's trapped in a wall and is an obvious nod to the Lord British from Ultima. He's not important to the plot and is shown to be a rather pathetic punching bag. This could have been a one-off jest, but he continues to appear throughout the series in small ways and is later revealed to be significant to the lore of the series. This likely was not planned, but his integration to the lore is so seamless it makes total sense. The interesting thing about this setting is how other Alisoft titles use it, like Toshin Toshi and Kyaru Neo Pianyan. They offer a different perspective of the world and explain things like reincarnation. They're not required to play Rance, but they are acknowledged in ways that are truly satisfying if you had played the games beforehand. There's also Mama Toda, which doesn't have the same setting, but does feature Rance characters, and Rance 9 could be called a spiritual successor. I've never seen a developer utilize setting and world building like this. Let me talk more about the tone of the series, as I feel like it's odd, but a major part of the series' identity. You see, it walks a thin line between being very ridiculous and dark. It's a difficult tightrope to walk. Too much zaniness might take away from the serious moments, but it somehow manages to balance this perfectly in ways that feel natural. Kichiku Rance is one of the most solemn entries in the series, filled with tragedy and rants at its most cutthroat. Yet, there's still moments of flippant humor, like Syl turning into a cow, or all the crass sex jokes. This balance of aloof, lighthearted humor and the more somber moments really capture the human experience. I believe Eroge is unique in being able to get away with this sort of tone, as it can discuss serious topics in a lighthearted manner. It defies the more common sense approach of having serious matters always discussed seriously. Lore and world building is cool, but an interesting world won't mean much without good characters to inhabit it. Luckily, Rance has a massive cast of colorful characters. Naturally, there's a plethora of cute girls, so many that it can be difficult to choose a favorite. They're extremely well written, having their own agency and desires outside of Rance and the main plot. Some get more screen time and development than others. Maria is one of the reoccurring characters that I find to be the least interesting. She doesn't have as much going for her other than her scientific knowledge and her love for Rance. Not a bad character per se, but she doesn't do much for me. However, I do know several people that do like her, which goes to show how different characters appeal to different people. There's a girl for everyone. Conversely, Crookmofus is my favorite character in the series, next to Rance himself. She doesn't show up until the 8th entry, Rance Quest, but she's so compelling. She has the perfect personality, relatable struggles, and the way she fits into the themes of this series is brilliant. It even has a few of the best female antagonists I've seen, characters like Am, Minerva Margaret, Camilla, and Medusa. Minerva in particular is rad because she's not sexualized at all, despite being an Eroge. She's a woman with the will of steel and powerful ambition. The series features multiple phenomenal male characters, which is uncommon for an Eroge like this, which usually focus on the girls. My favorite example of this is Patton Misnarch. He's one of the central antagonists of Rance 3, and introduced as the boorish and incompetent prince of the invading country of Helman. He was originally supposed to be killed off in the same game, but the creators took pity on him and spared him from his fate. One of the smartest decisions in the series, because afterward Patton does some self-reflection, realizes how pathetic he was, and undergoes a redemption arc. He would return in Rance 6 as a party member, now more worldly and mature with experience. By Rance 9, he's essentially the deuterologist and a completely changed man now trying to save his country from the corrupt people governing it. No longer being the selfish prince, he has built up his body in order to protect others. Watching his arc play out throughout the series is extremely rewarding, as he proves himself to be one of the coolest characters in the series. Konami has a similar origin, in how she was a nameless ninja in the first Rance, was given a name and important role in 3, has been a mainstay ever since. I could go on about how wonderful other character arcs are, like Shizuka, but I think it's better to experience for yourself. Now, if you've somehow stuck around this long and haven't played Rance, you may be wondering, how do I get into such a Goliath series anyway? Luckily, I have just a guide for you. The most common way of getting into the series is starting with Sengoku Rance, the 7th entry. This may sound strange, but you have to understand that it was the first game to receive a fan translation in 2009 and was most people's first experience with the series in the West. It's where the infamous screenshot about the Diviner Girls is from. It's self-contained enough from previous games, but still has optional returning characters, and you would understand some things more if you played the others first. Still, I think it works as a good highlight reel of the series. It has such mesmerizing gameplay and a nice story. It's a very strong entry that will likely compel people who play it to crave more Rance. I'll admit, it's one that I started with, but it's not exactly something I recommend doing now. A more sensible way of starting the series is with the 01, the remake of the first game that was released in English last year. It's not quite as good as Sengoku, but it's a solid introduction and a perfect remake. It comes bundled with 02, which I consider to be the series at its worst, but it's necessary and fairly short. However, my personal and insane order that I recommend starting with is Little Princess. This may sound odd, but bear with me. Little Princess is a 1986 adventure game that features early concepts and characters that will go on to be important in Rance. These concepts will be different in Rance, but it's interesting to see the evolution of ideas. Is the Little Princess good? No, it's kind of just nonsensical, but it is incredibly brief. After that, you must go through Little Vampire the sequel, which is marginally better, but still baffling. Of course, the next step will be playing the original Rance games. Absolutely worth playing, even if you don't go through with this order. I will always argue that 3 and 4 hold up well to this day. 4 has no modern remakes, so it's best to get used to the old style anyway. And I think I've touched on everything I wanted to, and explained why Rance is a great series. It's a series that's very dear to me, and I wanted to share my passion for it. There's never been a better time to get into the series, with a majority of the series translated and 9 in the not too distant horizon. Shout out to my good friend Chestnut Rance for helping with the script, one of the most knowledgeable people about the series, and gave me a lot of good ideas.